We are here to talk about this refurbishment project, and when we were preparing the talk, Faye produced this wonderful quotation from Morning the Christian Year. Through sleep and darkness safely brought, restored to life and power and thought. And Faye suggested that actually, as a metaphor for what we've been trying to do with Butterfield's architecture over the last 20 years, it was pretty good. The architecture had suffered over the last 100 years a period of benign neglect, sometimes malicious neglect. And what we've been trying to do over the last 20 years is to recover it. I'd like you to look at this picture. Some of you will recognise it. And in doing so, let me quote, if I may, it's a paragraph from the college record of 1974. And the quotation, I'm sorry, I shall have to put on my glasses for this, reads as follows. The appearance of the hall has been enlivened and we hope aesthetically improved by the installation in what was previously a blank wall space above the panelling at the entrance of a large painting by G.F. Watts, a story from Boccaccio. Painted in 1844, it illustrates the story in the Decameron of how a young gentleman of Ravenna persuaded a reluctant lady to marry him by showing her the ghosts of a similarly situated pair, of whom the man committed suicide and the lady died of remorse. Both of them being condemned in punishment, he everlastingly to hunt, she everlastingly to be hunted, naked as it appears. Though the lesson to be derived from this might be thought more appropriate to a women's college, the picture looks very much at home in Keeble Hall. Its warm colours of gold, red and brown relieved by a central seascape, blending happily with the brick and timber work and with the decorated ceiling. Now, I just want to make 2 points about that. From a distance of 45 years, that perception of what is an appropriate picture to be hung in Hall, I think if we propose to put that in Hall now, can you imagine post-Harvey Weinstein what the reaction quite properly would have been? And just as, and there's no, this was just the editor of the record of a very decent, honourable, intelligent, thoughtful man, but a person of his time making comments, including the joke about wouldn't it be better in a women's college, which would be seen now as wholly inappropriate. The mores of the time were reflected not just in the picture, but also in the attitude to the architecture. It fits nicely. No, it doesn't. It destroys the glorious arch at the east end of the hall. It cuts right across the layering of stone, coloured stone, followed by the brick patterning. It's a huge rectangle in a totally non-rectangular space, and it's a landscape. It's a horizontal rectangle in what is essentially a space which is vertically oriented. And that's not the only example. Here we have, and I'd like to read another much shorter quote from the college record of 1961. In the college itself, there has been extensive redecorating of the corridors in less sombre shades of paint than those used in the past. In the corridors so treated, the oaks have been removed since they evidently no longer serve the purposes intended. This has not only made the corridors appreciably lighter, it has deprived the undergraduates of at least one means of creating noise in the night. Now, so we have recovered as far as we can, the original Butterfield vision of the internal street with doors with sliding oaks and the paved area, which is now carpet, but it creates the same impression. That is much truer to what Butterfield intended than this kind of prison corridor, which was thought in 1961 to be such an improvement. So what we've been trying to do is to recover the original works.
But central to any restoration within the college would have to be the hall. Throughout the minutes of the Keble Memorial Fund, the body that raised the money to build the college, the importance of eating communally is raised again and again. And in fact, Keble was the first college to scrap private dining in its student sets. So for us, restoring the hall was restoring the heartbeat of the college.
We did the cleaning of the ceiling in 2002-2003. You can see the before and after. That's 130 years of coal gas, of cigarette smoke, of cooking fumes and so on. And similarly, we had to deal with the floor that was breaking up, and that work has carried on over a period of about 8 years.
It was absolutely painstaking work, as you can see. As much as is possible has been carefully preserved, with numbers placed on the original tiles to help preserve that original large-scale Butterfield pattern. And in fact, we went one step further.
If you go into the Sloane Robinson building, you will see the original central square of the hall, which was very carefully removed, and there are hundreds of pieces because some of those tiles were broken into 20 or more fragments, removed and lovingly reassembled as now a mural on the wall, recording the history of 140 years of students crossing that space. Now, do we go on? Yeah.
So that leaves us with the question, if we're going to restore the hall, what was the original vision? And this was where Keble's amazingly comprehensive archive really came into its own. We're very fortunate that we have a number of Butterfield's original plans for the college.
Well, the first thing we noticed looking at this plan is that the body of the hall has 12 tables, whereas we were working with 6 tables, 3 above the fireplace, to the west of the fireplace, and 3 very long tables below the fireplace. Actually, I'm not sure when they were crashed together, relatively recently, I think, but an obvious thing to do was to restore the original Butterfield arrangement of the tables.
So the next question from the bursar was if the archives held any of the original plans for the sideboard. It's not a bad question. Butterfield did design an awful lot of the furniture within the college himself. But I'm afraid here, Butterfield let me down. That was it.
That was it. What Butterfield had done in the plan was simply drawn a rectangle.
Yes.
And labelled it sideboard. And you can see on the elevation, similarly, he's drawn a rectangle. So we know the dimensions of the sideboard, but we've no idea what it looks like.
So here I turned to photographs, and with the technological marvel of Zoom, that was the best I got of our earliest photograph of the sideboard. I can tell it's taller than the surrounding tables, and it looks like it's on legs, but yeah. Here, next photograph along, different piece of furniture. It looks as though there's sort of cupboard sections and things stacked, and yet later, that is an entirely different piece of furniture again. So we were out of luck. So how did we progress?
Well, fortunately, we have some sanctuaries of original Butterfield furniture still in the college, particularly in the warden's lodgings. And this is a very fine sideboard in the warden's dining room. and provided the initial ideas for how we might develop a sideboard that would look in place and appropriate to the space in hall. And this is the result. You will notice that it copies from the warden's lodging the central recess. There are three main sections, central recess, but it has a much simpler panelling, and that is to reflect the fact that this is a much more utilitarian object, and it doesn't seek to compete with the panelling. It's part of the same ensemble. So we simply replicated in the panelling of the sideboard the panelling, the pairs of panels on the wainscot.
So whilst we're on the subject of furniture, let's have a look at High Table. This is a photograph of a layout that evolved over the years. This is before the restoration, and it's just one long straight across the top. But is this how it really was originally laid out?
Again, we went back to the Butterfield drawing, and this is the drawing of his conception of High Table. Notice there is one chair for the warden, who, as we've learnt earlier, is all-powerful. And then there are benches for the fellows, only on one side of the tables, so the total that could be seated in Butterfield's original conception was 11 on the centre and 4 on each of the side tables. I want to just show you one analysis of this drawing. Butterfield never did anything haphazardly or casually. And just look at how these tables are aligned. The central table has, at its east end, the end facing the main body of the hall, that is aligned with the central, the centre line of the transepts. So and similarly, the outer edge of the table, the side tables, is aligned with the north and south walls of the hall. It's a very precise configuration.
However, it would seem that Butterfield's ideal didn't last for long. That's the layout of High Table on the night that the hall opened. And it's not how Butterfield saw it. And it does seem to have been adapted to fit various events over the years, such as the 1959 Bump Supper. But today we have defaulted to Butterfield's original layout, using chairs rather than benches and seating on both sides. But this area is rearranged as necessary.
So that's the ceiling, the floor, the furniture, those all done. Now, what about the walls? The college's portrait collection had grown over the years, and when we started cleaning the panel behind High Table, the result was that we recovered what was a sort of matte black panel to a gloriously lively, almost cherry-coloured oak and mahogany panel. So beautiful that it seemed wrong to put portraits on it, except in the 6 spaces in the central section, which clearly had always been intended to house portraits.
So this is the time that the bursar approached me once again and said, so tell me, what portraits were there originally? It's a fairly formidable task, but fortunately the Victorians were exceptional administrators, and every time I open the council minutes, I thank goodness that they index them by hand. So I'm going to cut this bit short, and I will provide the information later if anybody wishes. I used the Register of Gifts and Benefactions to tell me what portraits the college had at the time that hall opened, and then to give me some more information, I cross-referenced those dates to minutes of the college council, which gave me more information such as to be hung in hall. Then, very oddly, the question of damp arose, which was able to confirm for me the position of portraits behind high table. So I could confirm that Gibbs, Talbot, Keble, Longley and Shirley were behind high table. But of course, this was all deduction.
Five portraits, but that left one. And who was that?
So the bursar reminded me that in past and present there was a letter referenced, and although I'd only been with the college about 6 months at this point, with a little bit of digging I found it, and it's a letter from Butterfield to Beecham confirming that those 5 portraits are the ones that he wants in hall behind high table. However, 5 isn't going to sit very naturally, and a news report of the day of the college's hall opening confirms that at that point, the portrait of Warden Talbot was temporarily hung in the JCR. But we knew that the architect originally wanted it there, so we had to find a 6th, at which point we decided who could be better than the person that Butterfield decided to write the letter to.
And that is the Earl of Beecham, the chairman of the council. So here we have I think, a set of the 6 portraits that maybe never sat there all at the same time, but we're pretty confident would have been Butterfield's wish. So we have the Archbishop of Canterbury at the top, we have Keble at the bottom, and to their left Shirley, who advocated brick, persuaded Butterfield that brick would be better than stone. Gibbs, who gave the money for the chapel, the Earl of Beecham, and the first warden, Warden Talbot.
And that brings us on to the portraits that then had to be reorganised and hung down the sides of hall. They were professionally cleaned by conservators, and I think you'll appreciate the difference in the before and after shots here. And the bursar developed a new hanging scheme as well, hanging of portraits.
Yes, hanging. Well, I've developed a new hanging scheme. And what we've decided, because we had to move a lot of the portraits from off the wall behind, or the screen behind high table. So we've moved all of the heads of house to below the fireplace, which would have been very difficult, except the present warden's portrait was already right at the far end below the fireplace. So he was pleased, I'm sure, to be joined by his predecessors, which left the walls, the north and south walls above the fireplace, and on one side, the north side, we have the portraits of other key people in the founding of the college, names all of which you will have heard, so Pusey, Liddon, Newman, Gibbs, the younger Gibbs, who gave the hall and the library, and someone who I felt absolutely had to be there, Shaw Stewart. There should be at least one person's portrait in all. And on the south side, we have more recent donors to the college. So Hayward, De Brain, and Heather Allen. So happily, actually, the first 3 portraits below high table on each side are the portraits of the people who give their names to the 6 quads in Keble.
Happily, this slide also shows the impact of the new lighting scheme. If you're going to spend so much time, love and effort cleaning something, make sure you can see it. So the latest in technology is used to ensure that the light is washed across the ceiling, and to reconfirm it as a social gathering place where people can eat communally. The lights were lifted so that you don't have to duck to talk to the person sitting opposite you anymore.
Now, the reason we were able to do this major restoration project over the winter is that we had to close the hall anyway, because we were doubling the size of the servery, which sits to the north behind the balcony, or behind the area that houses the balcony. We don't have a picture to hand of how it used to be, but there was a double door on the right-hand side, a totally inappropriate design, which was invariably left wide open. So you had a huge view into a very utilitarian and modern and neon-lit space, which was the servery. What we've done, what we've been able to do, is to get rid of that door, put in two new doors, which take their design from the one original Butterfield door into the hall from the kitchen, which is on the left-hand side, tucked away at the side. So that is it was the servery project that enables us to do all of the other work in the hall.
So to return to the quotation that we used at the beginning, through sleep and darkness safely brought, restored to life and power and thought. Keble College has always been alive. It's alive because of its students and staff. It's its architecture that has been asleep. What had been degraded was the integrity of Butterfield's vision through necessity or through neglect. Small changes collectively blunting the whole.
And so here we are, transformation.